The system has its own methodology, and the problem is that people aren't taught the methodology. They're taught conclusions, and they're taught other explanations for those conclusions without actually dealing with the methodology, because the methodology has a certain complexity to it and also has a certain amount of involvement of the person to it. In other words, it makes you have to think, it makes you recognize that it's not 100% clear. And this is what we've been talking about. The fact is that a lot of people want to hear a clear-cut statement from God. This is prohibited, this is permitted, that's it, I know exactly what God wants me to do. And the truth is that usually reality is not so clear.
Right.
So the question is, the halacha really presents methodology of how to try and analyze it. And the truth is that when you say beforehand that the system is broken or whatever it is, what I usually find is that the system itself is not broken. What's broken is that people try to give other explanations which they think people can buy more in order to explain the system, and in that way the system does have problems. Over and over again, I find people making conclusions or make statements, and then then the halacha itself gets challenged on it. And the truth is, those original statements were totally off.
Right.
The person did not know the principles of linear, and in many ways, some of them yield conclusions which a lot of people can't deal with.
Right.
Happens over and over again, where people are given simple answers for what's permitted and what's usher.
Like people with like look at the idea of kashrus, let's say, and mostly like people who aren't. Oh no, better example, tefillah, mixed davening. Saying, don't you feel that this, in the spirit of davening, that you should have a couple together of men and women? But then the answer is you have no clue what davening
is. The fact is that you bring that as an interesting example, because the original argument for mixed seating was called the family pew. It was the idea that the family should pray together, creates a certain amount of family camaraderie.
Right.
Now the truth is in certain ways we have that concept. If I tell you, not in terms of davening, but if I tell you in terms of Friday night meals, that people should sit separately Friday night, and there are people who do sit separately, men and women separately Friday night in two different rooms or whatever, and there are people who do that. But the point is that most people say no. There's an idea of family, and families should be together, and the family should eat together and bench together, and so forth and so forth. So we have this concept of a family feeling, nothing to do with licentiousness or something like that. It's like the family sits together, and it's very nice. So we have that. Let's say Friday night. There are people who disagree with that, but the point is that we really say, in terms of shul, the family pew doesn't have a place in our shul. Now, and this led to a very interesting statement by Rabbi Soloveitchik, because when the whole issue came up with mixed seating, and he's not talking halachically, halachically mixed seating is us. He's not even dealing with that issue. But in terms of dealing with the philosophy, most people basically argue that you have to have separate seating, because otherwise men and women are going to be looking at each other licentiously, and it creates a certain sense of promiscuity in the shul. And then what you find is that people in the other branches of Judaism get all upset and say, what are you talking about? Do you think people are just go to shul for pickups? And the reason they like going to shul is they say, hey, it's a family that prays together, and so forth and so forth. Their argument is the family should pray together, especially at bar and bat mitzvahs. You want to be there with the parents want to be together with their kids, and so the whole thing is a matter of the family, and they're not thinking in terms of. They say this is a whole crazy thing that you're thinking about, in terms of thinking that the only reason people are in favor of mixed seating is because they approve of promiscuity.
Well,
no, it's the aspect of family.
That, like,
but what's that? But Rabbi Soloveitchik makes an interesting point. His argument to give an explanation for why mechitza is significant, yes, he gives the other explanations of what do you call it, rechilas and so forth. And he gives explanations of there being a certain amount of kalas rosh and stuff like that. But then he says something really powerful. He says the fact is the concept of davening is mimakim Hashem. That from the depths from our depths we call it to God. He says the whole purpose of davening is to feel a certain sense of aloneness, a certain sense of need, a certain sense of being in crisis, and then we turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in davening. So he says that one of the aspects of davening is to be in a sense of uncomfortableness. And then he argues that's one of the reasons mechitza also. When you're with your wife, when you're with your family, you have a certain sense of security, a certain sense of that. He says that doesn't foster the attitude that's supposed to exist in terms of davening.
So when you go with your kids then?
No, the kids is one thing. So he says basically that security comes from your spouse. So he says one of the ideas of separating from mechitza is so you don't have the security of your spouse. Now the truth is, in terms of family, also the limitations. Most people don't know you're not allowed to kiss one of your kids in shul. Right? The fact of the matter is but the fact is you shouldn't kiss your kid in shul. Because the truth is the shul is not a place for that sense of family warmth or family that deep warm family feeling. The shul is a place of davening, and that place of davening, that's big shadow having weddings in the shul. Ooh. But the point is, I'm talking about just that's a more. If you can have weddings in actually base class and stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is we assume that just because that there's a good feeling in terms of family, okay, and has its place. We're saying that in davening, the Rabbi is saying that in davening, Yosher said in davening, that's not the place you're supposed to feel a sense of that security, because that's the place you're supposed to daven to Kodesh Baruch Hu. So the truth is that what happens is, especially in a world where we're trying to sell Judaism and trying to come across with it's this warmth and that warmth and that warmth and this warmth, the fact is that there are a lot of different things. But the point is there are a lot of different values. The question is what a value applies here, what a value applies there. And the question is to correctly know the complexity and make decisions within this realm of complexity. So when you guys are talking before about kashrus, you're talking about halacha question. So know the way halacha works. And halacha has its own reality. Does it parallel the reality of life? Yes, it does. Does it parallel normal reality? Yes. But are there distinctions? Yes. The fact is that you do find situations where there are distinctions. And there are halachic realities which may not be in line with the actual reality, and with the actual physical reality, and that's acceptable within a halachic system, and the decision is made pursuant to the halachic reality. Halacha has its system of how it makes decisions, because ultimately most of halacha is about how it makes decisions. You weren't there when you weren't there to shecht that animal. Okay? In the process from the shechting of that animal till it gets to your plate, okay, how do you know that this piece of meat is actually from that shechted animal? The truth is that there are halachic processes that are used to substantiate this idea, and if you find them, you get the halacha. Okay? Okay. What I want to do tonight is what?
His reflection is in the video.
Oh. Is that okay?
No.
Do you want to move over there a little bit?
That's being recorded right now. Sorry for autonomy. Anyway, go on.
Anonymity.
Okay, well, you can move back a little bit.
That's right. You're right. Oh, great. Now
anyways, okay. I want to start off this thing. Hakdama l'Sefer Shaarei Yosher. It's the Hakdama to a work by Rav Shimon Shkop. Shaarei Yosher is a book on halakhic theory, dealing with a lot of theoretical concepts of halakha. Do you have one?
Yep, it's under the chips.
Okay.
The
fact is that what this is, what I want to do with this is, what I find he does in his introduction, he tries to deal with a certain concept of hashkafa, of responsibility and analysis of your own involvement in making decisions and how you balance decisions in terms of your own, in terms of hashkafa. And what I liked is the fact that he doesn't come out and say, here's the final conclusion. He goes through a process to show how you get to a certain place. Okay? And what he's going to do is he's going to develop an idea of eventually leading, what I think to, is a balancing of values. Okay? The fact is, I've mentioned to you before, it's my theory that ethical decision making has to begin with the recognition that there are a variety of ethics. So the first thing you have to do is pull out the ethical principles, uncover them, discover them in all their subtlety. And then the second thing you can do with the ethical principles is you have to deal with the fact that they're in conflict. Okay? Ethical principles are in conflict, and that's usually where you find a matter of issues. How do you arrive at the proper conclusion? I pointed out to you before that when you look at the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra and the challenge that's faced Adam and Chava. So a lot of people say it's a good drive, it's a bad drive, and so forth and so forth. But in many ways, the Shtetl B'Forsh will point out that the real problem was a challenge in two ethical principles. One ethical principle is they understand that the human being was supposed to be an Eved Hashem, a servant of God. They also understood that the human being was also supposed to emulate God. To emulate God has to recognize that God is the ultimate decision maker, or is a decision maker. To be a servant or a slave, an Eved, means that you forego your decision making to let the master make the decisions. So if our goal is to be an Eved Hashem, then basically our goal is to follow God's decision for us. But in following God's decision for us, we also are, by definition, not emulating Him. Because to emulate God involves us it means that we have to become a decision maker. Because that's who God is. God is His will are one. He makes His own decisions for Himself. He represents Himself, His own will. So a slave's will is a master's will. The slave's will is totally obliterated in the face of the master. To be a master demands that you have your own will. If you're told to emulate God, then it means you want to develop your will and act upon your will. But on the other hand, if you're saying you're going to be a servant of God, it means you're going to follow God's will. So how do you exercise your own will and also are a servant of God's will? That, according to certain people, was the dilemma that faced Adam and Chava. They understood that there were these two objectives, these two values that were inherent to the human existence, and they were contradictory. And they did not know how to come to some conclusion about them. Okay, what to do? What do you do with conflict of values? Not good and evil in its simplistic terms of a bad drive and a good drive. But the fact is that if you really search the halacha, you find that everything that exists is created for a purpose. Therefore, everything has a purpose. And then the idea is to try and find its right place within that purpose, which means, how do you find a place for a certain value when there's other values that might be in conflict with it? Okay? And this happens all the time within the realm of Jewish thought. what I found with Shimon Shkop here is that in his introduction, he deals with some example of this on a very, very basic human level, of what the human dealing with the most basic human drives, the most basic human drive in terms of basic human drives of understanding what our values are about. Okay, so and he shows that certain drives have values. You may think that they're not values, but they have values, and they all have to find their place within the system, and that's what makes the system complex. Okay, so he says like this. Okay, so this is the introduction. Okay, okay, so he says, okay, okay, so God created us in His image. Okay, 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 and he says that He's placed within us that our greatest desire is lahatev im zulato, is to help others, do good to others. That's a very powerful desire within us. We want to, it's a very basic aspect of our existence that we want to help others, because that's the way God is, that's the way God has created us. Okay? Because God basically created this world for our benefit. Therefore, okay, therefore we are also, trying to imitate God and do things to help others. And that's the idea of what God says. It's the 612th commandment, to walk in His ways, and His ways are to help others, and so forth. We should be selected among His creations. So he's opening up with this idea that we have a value in caring for others, and to try and do as much good as we can to the general population. Okay, and that's really an emulation of God. Okay, so that's the starting point. Now that's a value that most people talk about, and so forth and so forth, in terms of the value of caring for others.
And that's
okay.
Tikkun Olam, isn't it?
Well, that's one way of understanding Tikkun Olam. It's a more popular way of understanding Tikkun Olam, but it's an aspect that we're trying to always help others. Now the point is, though, is in the back of your mind you're already recognizing that there's also in Judaism a value in taking care of yourself.
Okay.
So this opens up the whole question of how you balance this out: taking care of others, taking care of yourself, and so forth and so forth. Okay? Now, he's going to develop this concept. He's going to try and work upon this concept. Okay, so he's opening up with the idea that the basic goodness of human beings is in helping others. Okay? And that's an aspect of being like God in terms of helping others. Now you're going to see
whatever that means.
Right, because he's going to get into that. In other words, the fact is God basically referred to God as a Tov and Meitiv, as the good and the giver of good, and therefore God basically thinks of others. Okay, He has no benefit from, He basically, His whole relationship with others is to help others and not necessarily for His own benefit. Now, the truth is that the reason we're going to develop this more is that's a simple starting point.
Right.
Helping others. Okay. Then he's going to deal with this. Okay, now he's going to show how this concept of helping others is a much more complex concept than you might think.
Right.
It's not so simple. And then he's going to show how you deal with the fact that it also doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Right.
And that's when you start getting into complexity of how do you deal with these things. Okay? Most people start off with this idea that it's always good to help others, and you end up with the reality that there's a certain point in time where you also have responsibilities to yourself.
Right. That's where we find a lot of issues in this day and age.
The fact is in a lot of ways we. I'm fine. we simplify the issue. You see, we simplify the issue by, like, for example, I used to do a couple series on stucco, and I said I like to begin with the idea of people talk about stucco and generosity and so forth and so forth. I said, deal with the following situation. Okay, you're in Toys R Us and you're buying toys for your kids. Okay, your kids, you want to buy some toys. It might be good toys, but they're your kids, so you want to buy them toys. Right before you're going to pay for the toys, someone comes up to you and says, there are people dying in Africa. And the money that you are going to spend on these toys, if you give me that money, you'll keep these other people alive. Right? Okay, so what do? Person's sitting there and saying, point blank, this $100 you're about to buy these toys for your kids. If you give me the $100, these other children in Africa who will otherwise die will now live. Okay? So what do? So you sit there and say, well, objectively, life is more important than my kids having toys, so that argument works. Okay, so here, you take the money, you go, okay. Then we'll say, what would the person do? The person will go back in line and buy the toys again. Just, okay, here's $100. I'll go buy the toys anyways. And the person goes and says, that $100 you're going to spend for those toys, right, will save these kids. So the truth is, I can point out to you that I can get it down to any money you're going to spend on toys.
Right. Any money you spend on yourself keeps people, will kill people.
Will kill people. Okay? Okay, so what do?
Right.
So the point is there has to come a certain point where you have to recognize that your decision to buy a toy for your kid is made with an opportunity cost that someone else may not have a necessity.
This is the thing with the job.
What?
You work, you get a job, someone else doesn't. Like it's.
So the point is, but here's point blank is that that you have the situation that that you're making the decision that the benefit of toys for my kids is more important to me than that person being alive.
Right.
Now the truth is that
no matter what amount.
Right. When you start understanding that opportunity cost, when you start understanding that aspect, then you start really understanding human decision making.
Okay.
Human decision making, or the theory of decision making, is not about objective standards for everyone.
It's not about altruism.
It's not about everyone having the same, chicken in a pot. It's about the fact that certain people, because of their wealth, can have A, and other people will be absent A, absent a lot more than A. And that when we refer to certain people as being generous, we understand that they're foregoing what they possibly have totally from their expenses, but the fact is that they're still making choices of a certain, what you would call quote-unquote luxuries, while other people are suffering and so forth. And in a certain way that's accepted within the halacha. Because the fact is there's a limitation on how much charity you can give.
Right to be, but you also have the right to be rich.
Yeah, so how do you explain that? How do you understand that? How do you understand that concept that you have that certain individuals within the value system, it's okay for them to make decisions that are much more personally beneficial.
Well, for the job thing, it's not really like that, because that's like, with the job, it's, unless it's nepotism or something like that, it's, well, he could have worked harder, he could have been more desirable to the boss.
That's a possibility also. But the fact is that a lot of decisions in terms of jobs are also subjective.
Sure.
But the fact is that this exists.
Dating women
is,
even.
Right. The point is, the point is though, is that to really deal with with these issues, you have to deal with the understanding of the conflict of values in a certain way. What I would say, just simply in that case of Stucca, is you have a greater responsibility to your children for their entire well-being, including their psychological well-being and so forth and so forth, than you have towards someone who's not your child, even in terms of their physical well-being. In other words, at a certain point in time, you buy your kids toys because that's psychologically necessary for them.
That is so wonderful.
Right? Right?
My kid's dreidel is more important than your life.
Yeah.
If my responsibility,
I love that.
No, but by the way, it does put you in line with what you're really saying, though. The fact is, what you're really saying is that my kid's development as a healthy human being, okay, by God placing that kid in my hands, I have a greater responsibility to the overall health of my child than certain circumstances, than the limited health of some guy like that. And that may be true. That may be a factor. Okay? Now, the point is that you have to apply that with some type of understanding and so forth. By the way, I'm not defining that concept. I'm just saying that it's a way of looking at, in other words, looking at life through more complex eyes opens up greater ideas. So Shimon Schwab begins with this idea over here. He's basically saying, yes, there's a value in terms of caring for God. There's a value in terms of emulating God. Okay? And he's opening up like this. And he's looking at this, not the way I said it beforehand, he's looking at this idea of emulating God, that we are supposed to be giving people as God is a giver. And he actually says that's part of our being, that we like to help out others. It's part of our being. We like to help out others.
Religiously or?
In every way.
Really? We're naturally altruistic?
He's basically arguing that right now.
Really?
He's saying that part of the natural concept of the human being is to be natural, is to be caring. I mean, you basically see this in the street. When people say, pass it on. If you go out to the street and just say caring about people and so forth and so forth, you have details and arguments and so forth with most people. You know, I mean, I had a tire that was leaking, and I was just waiting outside my apartment, and some guy came by my window, told me to roll down the window, and he said, just want to tell you your tire's leaking. It's flat. And I said, thank you very much for telling me. He had no obligation to tell me.
Right, but you're in Canada also.
The fact is, most people have a caring. I mean, listen, I just saw, I saw on TV, LeBron James was wearing a T-shirt, I'm choking.
I can't breathe, yeah.
Right, I can't breathe. Which means that one of the most well-known basketball players in the world is standing up and saying, hey, I think this was wrong. And the fact is he didn't have to take a stand. Right. He could have kept his mouth shut.
He did wear a shirt.
but the fact is that's the way people are.
Right.
People generally, in many ways, people are people who do have a general... Now, how much they're willing to care, how much of the expense is, but they have a general idea of them. So Shimon Schwab is starting off his Hakdama here with a statement that we are created in God's image, and what that means, okay, is God has placed within him a major, an essence of his image, which is caring for others. That's halacha b'drachav, walking his way, and so forth, which is just a natural aspect of who we are. Okay, and now he's going to get in from there. He's going to develop. Okay, that's a starting point. Okay, it sounds like a nice, simple idea. Everyone love your neighbor as yourself, and it's a nice, simple idea. But now we're going to deal with the reality that when you look at this concept from a complex perspective, he's going to take into it. He's going to talk more about what this concept's about, how you define this concept, okay, how it is an emulation of God, and he's going to deal more and more with the aspect of, in this idea of then he's going to deal with the fact that, what do you do with the fact that you also have a concern for self?